Welcome back to the Pro Fluence podcast. It's great to have a guest on today with Cory Heitz. That was previously, I was a guest on his podcast, so make sure to check his out as well, which we'll get to. But talking prep school today. So Cory, appreciate you hopping on and super excited for this one. Very timely.
Yeah, Andrew, thanks for having me on. Good to have you back in the sphere again, and just love what you're doing with Pro Fluence. So excited to be here.
Appreciate it. Give us the quick rundown of what exactly you're working on from a high level, and then we can start to dive deeper into the mechanics of it and just the macro lens, because it's a wild time right now, and you're right at the center of it. So a lot to everyone listening, like you're in for a gold mine here.
Yeah, thanks for that setup. So my name's Cory Heitz. I'm the CEO and founder of Prep Athletics, and it's a company that helps basketball players, boys and girls from around the world, find the right fitting prep school. And Andrew, there's about 150 prep schools across America. Most of them are on the East Coast, and they're just like D1. They're all different shapes and sizes. And if you're a family trying to Google, what prep school is right for me, you're just going to get lost. So families hire me to make sure of all those 150,000 prep schools out there. Once I look at a player's athletic ability, their grades, what kind of experience they want, and their finances, I take all those prep schools and narrow it down to the right fitting 3 to 5 for each individual player. And if they pick any of those, they're going to be in a good position, but I want them to pick the best fitting prep school for them. And I never tell kids where to go, because I'm a 40-year-old man in Colorado, and these kids have different perspectives on what is important to them. But a big factor that I tell families to look into, if money works out at all these places, is a player's relationship to the coach. So I'm a concierge for these families. I help them from the start to the finish. And then once they sign with a prep school, as a lot of kids are doing today and yesterday with the March 10th day when all the acceptance letters come out from prep schools, once they sign with a prep school, now they're under the coach's tutelage and umbrella, and they're off to fly. So I'm like a bridge between high school and prep schools.
It's incredible. Like if you think back 20 years ago, if someone said like you're doing what you're doing, it'd be like, what? Like, what's a prep school? What even is this, right? Like, what's AAU basketball? It's wild how fast it's evolved. So how did you come into this opportunity? Where did you see it? When did it begin? And then, obviously turn it into a full-fledged and thriving business. So I'm curious, back to the inception.
Yeah, we got to go back to a time machine in 1993. And my cousin, Brad Miller, was one of the top big men in the country. He was going to high school in Indiana, and then he went on a recruiting trip to Oklahoma State and drank some beers with big country Bryant Reeves and head coach Eddie Sutton, and came back to his high school and bragged about it. And the coach said, I got to kick you off the team. And he was up for Mr. Basketball, had high majors recruiting him. And my dad was big time in his life, because Brad's dad had left the picture, and Brad's mom was my dad's sister. So with the help of my high school coach, we got him to a prep school in Maine called MCI to play for a coach named Max Good. And Max Good used to be the coach at Eastern Kentucky. My high school coach played for him and coached for him. And at MCI, it was all dudes from Brooklyn and just the Bronx, and they were ballers. But Brad was a 7-foot white boy from Indiana, knew how to play, and he went up in New England and dominated. And Max ended up becoming a father figure for him, ended up pushing him hard. And Brad ended up going to Purdue for 4 years and then played in the NBA for 14 years, right? So prep school, Brad said this many times, without prep school, he's not playing in the NBA. Fast forward to me, I'm playing on a national powerhouse team. I'm 6'7", 190 pounds, backing up an All-American for 3 years. I'm not playing much. Richard Pitino, his older brother Mike, is on our team. We got kids on my team go to Kentucky, Notre Dame, Georgia, Marshall. I went to Air Force. So I realized I needed more time to develop. And we heard about prep schools through my cousin. So the only schools recruiting me at the time were the military academies, and they all wanted me to go to prep school. So I decided to do that, right? I didn't have fits. I didn't have a consultant. I just knew it was free and it was a path to D1, because Andrew, I was a D1 or bust kid, because 5 members of my family before me played D1. So I just assumed I was going D1. And my dad's 7 feet tall. His brother was 6'11", who played at Oklahoma. Their other brother was 6'10", who played at Kentucky and got drafted in the NBA. So I just assumed it was my right to go D1, right? So 6'7", 190, we marketed myself as the white David Robinson, right? Because David Robinson went to Navy at 6'6", grew to be 7'1". The rest is history. I've been 6'7" since 16. I'm still 6'7" at 48. I haven't grown since then. But that's how I marketed myself, is look at all my genes. You're going to get me, and you're going to get a steal, because I'm going to go to your academy. This is before the transfer portal and NIL. So it's I was going to stay there. So anyway, I ended up going to the Air Force Academy, waiting to grow to be 7 feet tall at prep school. And then I was going to go to West Virginia, where my dad played. It didn't happen. And I realized really quick, hey, my only chance to play D1 is probably here at Air Force. So stayed in the Air Force program, played in the JV program there, and then had to spend 5 years after that as an officer and 9/11 happened during that time. So it made my desk job interesting because I had to deploy to the Middle East. So I always tell kids, like, do you want, how bad do you want to play D1? Because I had to go deploy to a war zone because I wanted to play D1, right? So that's kind of a story I give on that. So I knew about prep school from my cousin, from my own experience. And like without prep schools, like our family trajectory is completely different, right? So fast forward to 2008, I'm coaching a kid in Canada. He's really good. And Brad and I worked to get him at MCI where Brad went on a deal. And this kid ended up getting an NAI scholarship out of it to a top 10 team in the country. So I was like, this works. Then I was coaching Kentucky. There were 8 kids I helped get into prep school. 7 went D1. And then just started visiting prep schools, asking more questions. I did it for free for about 8 years, maybe 9. I didn't even know it could be a business. I was doing real estate development on the side. I just enjoyed helping kids and letting them know this world existed. And then my college coach sat me down one night, yelled at me for 2 hours, telling me, like, you're spending too much time and money on this. Families will pay you for this. And at first it sounded dirty. I was like, I'm going to ask families to pay me for this because I didn't know you could make this a business. And fast forward to today, right? We're in March of 2025. And it's a full-blown international consulting company. It's taken over my real estate development in the Midwest. And just like you, I wake up every day loving it because I'm so passionate about this, because if it's the right kid and like they had nothing and they learn about this world, they love it. And then when they graduate and sign with a college that was nowhere within their realm, it's the best. And I've got families that have money that can write a check, no problem. I've got families that have nothing that I've helped get full scholarships for, and then everything in between. And it's just like you, every day I wake up and I know I'm helping like basketball players realize their dreams. And it's a blast. So yeah, I'm busy as heck right now. And I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it's super cool. And I wish I knew about you when I was going through it, 10 years ago about now or whatever it is. It's crazy how fast it goes. But, I knew nothing. I had a few D1 offers, lost them. Just for anyone that doesn't know my story on the sports side. And, it was like, I got to go to prep school if I still want to go D1, and visited a bunch, committed to one, then got an offer, basically declined the prep school, went early to BU, and the rest is history. But it's like, I probably, like, if I had guidance like yourself, probably wouldn't have even been in that spot, which is always interesting just in hindsight looking back. Like, like you think you know everything, you didn't. And that's why I always say, like, agents and consultants, and it's such a valuable piece to the ecosystem. I want to get more into now, like the mechanics, right? You 50,000 prep schools. We hear about 150 prep schools that are, we'll just call them legit. I'm sure there's more that are always popping up and leaving after a few years, but give us the rundown on what exactly they are, where they're mainly located, just sort of high level logistics of these prep schools. And I'm assuming you're doing it mainly just around basketball, but anything around that as well.
Yeah. Expanding to other sports like the IMG model has been something we've talked about, but I don't know other sports. I do have some contacts that can help with other sports, but maybe one day we do that. But right now, my biggest thing is bandwidth. And I barely have the bandwidth to handle all the basketball players. And I just love basketball. I love watching ESPN Plus, seeing all my kids play in these random teams sometimes. So we're not expanding yet, but let's talk about the prep school versus basketball academy, just to get that out front so people are educated. So prep schools are like tiny college campuses, right? You've got dorms, you've got admission buildings, boiler rooms, janitors, school nurses, gyms, dorms, alumni networks, accreditations, and then Wikipedia pages. And like my coach, Coach Mike Hart at St. Andrews says, a principal and a prom, right? So some of these places have been around since even before America was a country. Right. Location-wise, most of them are located on the East Coast. Most of them are concentrated in New England, but there are a few sprinkled throughout the country. Probably the oldest one out west is that's reputable is Wasatch Academy in Utah. There's some in California. They're just not that flexible and they're not as new, but that's the prep school world. Now, basketball academies are popping up more and more these days. And that started back in the 2000s with Finley Prep, which my high school coach helped start. Right. And Finley Prep started, a bunch of NBA guys come through there. And then that started spreading to where today you've got basketball academies all over the U.S. And there are some good ones out there. Right. I did used to work with basketball academies because I tried to help everyone I could. And if I had a kid that only had $5,000 and maybe one parent in the house, their only option would have been a basketball academy. So in the old days, I sent a lot of kids to them, but slowly started having issues, right? Such as 6 kids in a room that probably should have only housed 2 kids. Only being fed pasta and Cheerios for meals because that's the cheapest bulk thing to buy at Costco or Sam's. As I had kids at a Christian school and the coach was cheating on his wife and showing the kids porn, right? I got lied to about offers the kids were getting. And the final straw that broke the back was Nations Christian down in Florida. There was a Haitian player that recorded the coach threatening to deport him if he didn't do something. And that made its way to Good Morning America, Mike and Mike in the Morning. And I had 5 kids there at the time. So it was that moment right there where I said, you know what, my reputation and my integrity is not worth it anymore. And I can't guarantee the safety for these families I'm trying to place here. So if you don't qualify for a brick and mortar prep school, like I just mentioned, I'm not going to be able to help you. So I can't help as many kids, but the kids I'm helping now, Andrew, are going to legit places. That's just a warning on what these basketball academies are. And let's give a couple examples, right, that have been in the news. Bishop Sycamore, right? An HBO documentary was made on that football team that got blown out by IMG by like 70, 80 points. That was a pop-up football academy, right?
And I met their he was actually going to come on the podcast before that all happened at one point. Anyway, super funny. I met him and craziness.
I think he probably has a new spot. Do you know this or not?
I don't. I haven't followed it, but I have his number in my phone.
Let's call him right now. Let's call him now. Make it a 3-way.
We might have to.
So anyway, that's a guy just doing things for the wrong reason. Another famous one, Honda Academy. You know that one? Kanye West. So some of these places don't make it because of money. He's a billionaire, so money wasn't a problem, but he went on an anti-Semitic rant. The next day, all the players left, and it's done like that. So these black swan events, that's what these academies can't, handle. And you got things like COVID. You've got things like a financier backing out. You've got something like Kanye making comments. If a headmaster or president of a prep school goes anti-Semitic, he'll be fired. The whole school won't be shut down, right? So there are good basketball academies out there. I don't have time to research them all, but even ones that have good intentions, things can happen and they can shut down. And then you've got kids, left in the dust. So some of these basketball academies call themselves prep schools. And I'm constantly on a soapbox educating people that I just explained what prep schools are. These places aren't prep school. They're more affordable. They can still place you and get you better. Just know you've got to do a lot of due diligence.
Yeah. And I don't want to cut you off, but you say basketball academies, do you see this in other sports as well? Or is it mainly just basketball where they have these sports specific, portions?
I've only heard of Bishop Sycamore for football, but I don't keep up with the other sports, so I couldn't tell you.
Okay. So realistically, very few. I'm sure there's a few, but probably not many. It's mainly just basketball, I would assume.
Yeah, but think how easy it is. All you need is 12 players. You can fit them in a house, a van, and have a gym versus all the padding you need for hockey or baseball or football.
Well, there was one in Pittsburgh when I think it was right after I graduated. It was some, super wealthy guy wanted to get his kid D1, started a school. It's called First Love. They brought in a bunch of kids from Ohio, West Virginia. You might remember the name.
I know First Love,
yeah. And then they just basically, it was just the basketball team. Then essentially an AAU travel team that was at school, and they went and played the national circuit. Now all the kids went D1, I'm pretty sure, and they did well. But it was basically a wealthy dad just funding the whole thing to increase the chances for his son, but control it and bring other good players around him. So that was really interesting. But now, now the kid leaves, school's done.
Yeah. And here's the thing I say about that is I'm never worried about the good players. They're going to be fine whether they go to a basketball academy, prep school, stay in high school. They'll be in college. I'm never worried about them. I'm always worried about, guys 6 through 13 on the bench, who are probably paying full price, who are funding these guys that are starting. Are they getting placed? Are they getting developed? Right? To me, a guarantee I make my kids is if you go to prep school, that coach has to place you in college. That's one of the things you're paying for is placement. Now, be D1, might not be a scholarship, but it'll be the best fit at the time. And in this crazy world, which you're discussing all the time, you need an advocate. And to me, there's no better advocate than a prep school coach for a player. Right? So our academy's doing that. Some of them are. Yeah, but it's just, and here's the thing too, just do your due diligence. Google search the coaches, find out who the adults are going to be, talk to parents that were going to be there or were there the previous year, both of starters and both of bench players. And if academy has changed names, why? There's an academy out there that's had 3 names now. I'm just why is that? That's curious. And I'd never get a straight answer if I asked. But like I said, I want to preface that there are good ones out there with good guys running with the right intentions. It's just, I want people to have their eyes open and know these are not prep schools. So just do your due diligence and be very careful if you reach out to them.
Now, on the correction earlier, from 150,000 to 150 might be. But do you think there's going to be more that, filtered through, or where are we headed from the macro, as it seems like, and I'm sure you'll tie in here. We were talking about a little bit before, but before you're vying for a scholarship mainly, right? But now you're also vying for potential, not only scholarship, but true NIL, true potential life-changing money, family-changing money, if done well with all that's coming in college now. I even saw today that Georgia with their revenue split. This is just the revenue split between 12 or 13 basketball players. It would be 200,000 each. So, for the top player, it's probably 500. For the lower, it's still, 50, 100, like still, well above median average wages in the US.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for prep school specifically. So I do know now the top players are getting agents, right? And they're not so much getting paid from traditional prep schools, maybe a Montverde with a Cooper Flag, maybe a Utah Prep with AJ Diambatset. Maybe they're doing deals, right? I think they are. It's the rumors I've heard, but I'm not going to confirm that because I don't know. But if I'm a good player now, I need to think about whether I want to go to a postgrad or go to a Montverde or not, right? If I go to Montverde or some of these other places, I don't really have to go to class. And at a traditional prep school, you're going to have to go to morning assemblies. You're going to have to go to class. You might have to go to mandatory events. And some kids just might not want to do that. They might want to go more with the professional model, right? So that's going to depend on the families. But here's an example I want to give about one of my clients is that he's 6'8", one of the top 5 players in the state of Washington, and he already has D1 offers, and he wants to do a post-grad year just to see if he can bump up to mid to high major, right? And they're investing not a good chunk of money, about half price for prep school. Prep schools can range between, 38,000 on the low end to 75 on the high end. IMG can be around 85 to 90, just so people know what these costs are. So let's say they're investing $30,000, right? And he bumps up from low major offers he has now to mid or high majors by having the right performance at the right time. That could now put 6 figures in his pocket per year, right? Which is new. The family's not hiring an agent, so they're going to do it on their own. But now this is a new realm prep school coaches have to deal with, right? And last year I was in a gym, or actually a coach's office, and he had a top 100 player, and he was giving me some scenarios that he was trying to advise the family on. And this kid didn't come from anything. But here's the scenario, right? Kid was from the East Coast. So he could have stayed and played for a Big East school in the East Coast for $150,000, right? Or go play in the Midwest for $600,000. Now, he was a better fit in the East Coast. Mom could see him play. But that's a $450,000 difference. So now a prep school coach has to have that in their skill set on how to advise them. Now, agents will probably advise to go to the Midwest. They can get their 20% higher. But these are the situations, even if you don't have a family or have an agent around, what's the right decision there, right? You and I are in the business world, Andrew. People move jobs. They don't want to get pay raises. Do you play for a coach you might not like as much to get $450,000 more? The kid ended up choosing. Okay, guess what the kid chose? Do you have any idea?
He definitely probably went Midwest and then transferred after a year.
Nope, he stayed close to mom and got the 150. So anyway, every family's got to make their own decision. I'm just saying that's the kind of situations now that real high-end players
and also I think we're still not at a point too where that 650 is always as guaranteed. There's still a little nuance. So fast forward 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, maybe that's a little more of a solid of a decision. But there are these clauses too. There's a lot of weird clauses and injury things. And so 650 isn't always 650 today. It will be very soon in the college world. But right now there's a lot of loopholes and stuff.
You tell me this. Is there anything out there in the college world to where it's you get paid per point scored or charge taken? Is there anything like that yet?
I haven't seen anything like that. There are definitely performance kick-ins, and we have had someone on the podcast, and he didn't go too deep, but Louisville basketball had a phenomenal year this year, men's basketball. Rebound year, I think the coach won Coach of the Year. The guy we had on the podcast, Dan Poneman,
Dan, yeah, I know Dan.
Dan placed, basically a lot of their roster. And it's just really interesting to see, it's kind of crazy how that worked. But it worked out really well. And he's giving me here and there, and it's more for him to say than me. But there's definitely performance things, both from the agent standpoint, depending on how well the team does if they place things, but also from the player standpoint of, coaches get bonuses, right? Hey, you win this many games, your team. I used to hate, or if we had over a certain GPA, our coach would get a bonus. What? That's crazy. So, players are now starting to see some of that as well in their NIL contracts.
How about this incentive model? I heard this from a guy. I don't know if it came to fruition, and this might just be a rumor, but he wanted to replace search firms, right? College plays search firms. I don't even know what the range is to find a college coach. He was going to be a search firm and do it free for the colleges, but only if the coach succeeded would you pay him. So if the coach, won 20 games, you paid this guy X amount of dollars. They won the conference championship, you pay him more money. Makes the NCAA tournament, more money. So if the coach does well, you pay on the back end versus all up front. And I thought that was fascinating. Has that happened? Do you know?
I'm sure. There's always thing. Like if you're thinking about it, someone else probably has and maybe tried to execute it or has executed it. One of my things is I don't know if there's any like true original thoughts or ideas out there for the most part. Like I think there's this like, this is a little more off topic, but like this higher consciousness and we all sort of tap into it. And so you sort of feel things or people start to get similar ideas. But anyway, I have seen though some really interesting things on the women's side, but discussion for another day. But that's unique because like of Title IX, and they still have to give full scholarships, and the NIL money seeping over a little bit, and some of the players are super marketable. So I've seen pro athletes sponsor like certain college players, like actual NBA men's players come in and sort of like almost acting like agents a little bit, where they're like, hey, they're signing a deal, but there's not much cash and it's mainly like mentorship, but everything's going downstream to capture as early as possible. And we'll have someone else on the podcast soon that's building a really fascinating model in college. He's already sold a company in the college sports space. He's been on the podcast already as well, but it's all around the video games for football and capturing a percentage of earnings from the video game, but basically having like the rights a little bit. So when if they go to the pros or NFL, they're getting a little bit of the cut then there too. So it's how early can you get to the athlete? You can take cuts as they advance. So anyway, there's a lot of arbitrage going on right now with that.
All right, one more thing I want to throw out, then we'll get back to prep school.
Mm-hmm.
I heard a rumor, and I don't know if this will be legal, but that players will be able to have QR codes on their uniform. So during a game, people in the stands are watching it. Like Caitlin Clark last year, she had a QR code and she hit a good shot from the hash mark. I could have clicked on it and given her a tip during the game, right?
I haven't heard about that, but that makes so much sense because it's already sports betting. So if she wins she hits, say there's like I don't sports bet personally myself, but say there's a line out there for 5 or more threes and she hits a 5th three. It's like, oh crap, she just won me $300. I'm going to send her 10. I could see that. That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. Or Luka makes a pass, tip him $10.
Yeah.
That starts adding up, especially for college players. Or like, if your team it's a game winner in the NCAA tournament and upsets a team, you just click on it.
I'm sure there's some legal things in there. And I'm sure there's already been multiple cases this year, especially in men's basketball, of, shady things around betting with players and suspensions. And I don't know. We live in a wild time, not only of the world, but sports as well. So it's cool, but there's a lot going on.
So much going on. Yeah, like I try to think outside the box in this stuff and talk to people like you to see if there's any way to capitalize on something no one else is thinking about.
Well, one more thing we'll throw out there, and this is a great little, like if someone just has this like 4 or 5 minute section, there's like maybe 4 business ideas right in there. But we all focus on, and I've seen so many ideas like, oh, the future earnings of players, right? Like let's invest in them and maybe you get future earnings, right? But like if you think about it now, like coaches are going to be jumping around a lot more. They're going to be on shorter leashes because there's real decisions being made of, hey, we're going to pay a kid $5 million. Well, if it doesn't pay out, like I believe the coaching is going to become even more, they're going to start jumping around more too. So some people have talked about like give some coach some upfront and maybe some NIL money. And then if the coach, like you can start to piece some of his extension, like you can get some of his future earnings. Like you're trying to develop the coach side, which I thought was interesting because their pay continues to go up and because it's going to become more hectic. So I thought that was pretty fascinating, but I don't know. That's hard to execute. We'll see.
Well, you say hard to execute, but these agents are negotiating huge buyouts, which is just however that got started is amazing because I think that's really
there's a story nuts on that. We should probably surface that for people. It'd be a good one. But I know there's a story. I've heard the story of how it all started. It might even be Brian Kelly. I don't know, but once it happened once, then cat's out of the bag.
Yeah, because there are college coaches now. I think Chris Mack is one who got let go, and he just got millions of dollars just to sit at home every day.
Yeah, there was like $500 million in coach buyouts last year. I know we did a post about it at one point of just dead money.
Dead money, yeah,
crazy. So I guess headed forward on the prep school, where do you see it going? How are parents now thinking about it? Has it changed over the last few years? And what should people be paying attention to in the prep school space?
I think it's only getting busier and more global now, right? Like you got the Nike Scholastic League playing on ESPN. You've got teams like Montverde. You've got teams like Oak Hill, IMG. They're international brands now, right? So those aren't your traditional prep schools. Like Oak Hill is, but like people around the world, when they call me, like, hey, we want to go to prep school. We don't, can you help us talk, difference between the IMG, Brewster, Montverde, and the kid might, just be not even close to that level. So yes, it's getting more popular. The game's gotten older, right? Like the game, since COVID, the average age of college basketball players is now 18 months older on average. So pretty much everyone playing D1 is 19 years old when they step on campus, right? So there's very rarely you'll see a 4-year player anymore. So you've either got to reclass in their home state, transfer to a post-grad and reclass, or transfer to a prep school and reclass, or do a postgraduate at prep school, right? So the game's gotten older too. And, the big thing now that I'm hitting kids over the head with, even my really good players, is you have to be okay with the best fit at the end of the day. Like, I know you want D1, but like, we can't, like, things are happening later now. Like it's March right now. There's so many prep school kids not placed because they have to wait for the transfer market to shake down after the NCAA tournament. And then once that settles, then college coaches go fill those last few spots with prep school kids. So the game is later now as far as placement goes, and families and kids are just stressed. Prep school coaches got to work harder. And that's, once again, another reason I highly suggest prep school coaches, because they do have the big black book, right? They are using integrity. When you got an AU coach or a prep or a high school coach, they're going to fluff their kids up, right? They're going to hype them. Prep school coaches can't do that because year after year, they've got to be honest about their kids or they're going to lose credibility with college coaches, right? So to me, Andrew, if I feel like I could get a D1 coaching job right now, I wouldn't have to coach at all. I would just sit in the phone and call prep school coaches and say, hey, I'm at this school at this level in this conference. Who can play for me? And they're not going to BS me. They're not. They're going to say, like, trust me, this kid can play for you. And I'll be like, we'll take him. And I guarantee that kid's not getting recruited like he should. So to me, it's just a wealth of players and talent. So I think the demand's going up globally. It's getting tougher and tougher to get these spots, especially if you're a guard. Like, look, every time on my podcast, I have a high school or prep school or college coach on, I ask them the same question. What's it take to be a D1 guard? And hell, you were a D1 guard, right? And every answer is different, right? And I throw a stick right now, I'm going to hit a guard out my window, right? So all these guards around the world want these limited D1 spots. And there's no guarantee you go to prep school, you'll get one, but you got a better chance, right? And that's all you can ask for. So that's one thing I tell parents too, is part of the reason you're sending your kid to postgrad is to prevent a midlife crisis in 30 years, where they're sitting there in bed going, I wonder if I'd have gone to prep school, what could have happened? And mind you, I've had kids that I've coached that didn't want to listen to me about prep school. They went to the offer they had, which I knew they could have gone higher. And they come to me and they're like, Coach, I wish I just would have at least visited the prep school, or at least talk to the coach, and it's going to sit with them the rest of their lives, right? So that's nothing the kids don't understand, but the parents do. So at the end of your 5 years at a prep school, that's what level you are. But now if it's not, you can jump up because of the transfer portal. So like, it's not even the end of the day once you graduate prep school. So it's a wild world out there. And like, people do it all the time without consultants like me, and I don't know how. They'll pick a prep school based on what a neighbor did or what a trainer says when there's 148 other prep schools out there. That's why I give the pitch from me or other guys. There's a few other guys that do what I do. Like, we can help you, tell you if it's an option, if it makes sense. And if it does, let's make sure you're talking to the right people.
Yeah. I don't say I'll ever like think back, but it's wild how you have to make such big decisions at fairly young ages, where even for me, like, I really had 3 completely different paths. I went the BU route and it was awesome. And I will never look back and be like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Like, I'm always like, it was the right path for me. But I do sometimes think, well, if I went to prep school, what would have happened? Because the second I said I was going there, I started to have Power Fives reach out. And I don't know if I was good enough to play, but I had BYU calling, I had things. And then the third is always because I had originally committed to Army West Point if I had went the military route. I mean, those are 3 completely different paths out of, it was 17 or 18, which is pretty nuts. Yeah, they are big decisions. And, we appreciate you with an increasing role in the space. So give us the rundown. Where can people listen to your podcast? What's your website? Where can people learn more? Where can people work with you if their kids are going to go through it on the basketball side?
Yeah, go to prepathletics.com and everything is on there. You can sign up for the newsletter, which comes out once a month, which has a lot of good nuggets in there. Our podcast is always on there too. YouTube, we've got a lot of extra bonus clips on there. That's really growing a lot. And look, I met 2 families 3 weeks ago in Boston when I was at a couple prep school games that picked prep schools just by listening to me and my interviews with prep school coaches and reading all the information on my website, right? So everything's on there for free. Like, there's no secrets, right? So if you are looking at prep school, reach out to me. But I put a lot of evergreen research on there and resources to help you at least know enough to be dangerous, right? If you want hand holding, and I call myself an insurance plan, like you're hiring me to make sure you're talking to the right fitting 3 to 5 schools. You can do it on your own, but like I'm an insurance plan in this world to help you do it. But I don't take on everyone as a client because you've got to be either really good, have really good grades, have a blank checkbook, or some combination of that. Or there are schools that have money for full scholarships. They call it aid up there, need-based aid, but I can help families with that too if a kid is interesting and checks enough boxes. But prepathletics.com, everything's there. Every email that comes to me, I respond to. I prefer email versus DMs. It's just easier to get to me. But I'm a champion and a cheerleader for the prep school world, and I want everyone to at least know about it. Whether you go or not, that's up to you and your family, but at least look at it as an option, because in this new day and age of everything being so fast moving, I've said it twice before, I'm going to say it again, you need an advocate. And to me, there's no better advocate than a prep school coach. And I want to make sure you're connected to the right ones.
Last thing on the business side, from the investors listening, starting a prep school, do you think there's a need to potentially, and they cost, be quite the capital intensive play. Do you think there's room for business opportunities on the prep school side of things, or maybe it's more basketball academy merging it? What do you sort of see from that lens? I'm taking it from a different angle.
Let's look at the top end IMG, right? They're for profit. So they're more of a corporate feel, right? I feel it when I go there, kind of families feel it too. And that's fine. You're going there. It's more of a professional model, right? And they have to make money. So a lot of our conversations start with the finances the family can invest in it. All right. And they save their money for the really good players. They've got really good players. They've got full pay or close to full pay. I'm not sure how many in between they've got, although that does happen, as I've personally experienced. They've got a good business model, but they're so big and international. I don't know how to do that one. If you want to make a basketball academy, you and I can make one on this call. We call it Cory and Andrew's Basketball Academy. That's all we need to do. That's all we need to do, right? If you want to make money from it, that's tricky. Because, there's only so much families are going to pay for an academy, right? If I'm going to pay $50K for a startup academy, why not take that to a prep school that's been around 200 years? That's established, right? Even $30K, I've got about 20 prep schools that'll take a kid for $30K, right? So that's where a lot of these families in these regions outside of New England or places that have prep schools just don't know this world exists. That's why I'm trying to constantly let them know, like, there's more going on than just your local basketball academy. But places trying to make money, it's tough because, do you fill your roster with kids that can pay $40K? All right, cool. You do that. What are you offering? What's your placement history? What's your experiences going to be? Like, where are they staying? And it's tough. So I've talked to a lot of people that want to start them, and I dissuade them because, like, my first ask is always why. Like, why do you want to do this? Because it's going to be a lot of work. You got to recruit the kids. You got to get them better. You got to schedule games. And then in this current market, you've got to place them in college. And there's no worse time to try to place a kid in college than now. When I coached at Gonzaga High School back in 2011 to 2013, we had 9 D1 players on our team. Villanova, North Carolina, Dayton, Loyola, Cornell, Longwood, Syracuse. And I was the recruiting guy. Even then, before COVID, before the portal, I would get a third of the coaches to call me back at the D1 level, right? So now how are you going to get all these kids placed? Because I know that's what you're probably promising them, right? So to me, I dissuade them because there's already schools set up doing this. I have it in place and know what they're doing. So an investor, it can be done. I know agents might be getting into that game, like in your prolific prep area or Utah prep. I know there's some agents kind of in the background there. I don't know how their model works, but to me, it would be so much work. I would love to start my own academy and do it the right way. Take 12 hardworking kids that don't have much, just get a little skin in the game, coach them, get them playing JUCO teams. And then I would be on a daily basis going to a jail, talking to inmates, going to a burn unit, talking to kids that have nothing, volunteering, doing ice training, sauna training, hiking a 14er. Every day would be about getting them ready to become young adults, opening a checking account, knowing about credit scores, like life lessons. I would love to do that, not have, maybe a couple JUCO classes a day online, but I would love to start one just to focus just as much on being a young, productive member of society as much as being a good basketball player. But I know, I get sick, it could shut down. Like, I know the black swan events that can happen. So I would never do it because I just know it would be so much work. And as a father with 2 young kids, I don't have the bandwidth for it. So I highly caution people to get into this because I don't know how lucrative it can be unless you're looking to ride the coattails of a good player that comes through. But guess what? There's 100 other people that are going to be vying for that kid. And I always go back to, what's your why? Why are you doing this? Do you want to help kids? Are you trying to make $75,000 a year? Are you trying to get on a D1 assistant, D1's coaching staff? What's your why? And it's just, are you ready for the bandwidth? Because it is no joke. So I know it's negative sounding, but it's just like, I don't
No. It's
think
the
it's good.
challenges, right? You gotta, yeah. If you're gonna do it, those are just like, okay, we'll overcome those. Do you think NIL payments will head to prep?
I actually last 2 years have tried to start NIL 101 with a couple prep schools, and it's just the bandwidth was too much bandwidth these kids and coaches had going on, so we couldn't get it work. But I had a product, I had a presentation. They were going to make a little bit of money doing a couple social media posts just to train them for what it could be like in college. And we never got off the ground, but I think there will be NIL deals. In fact, I tell my players, like, look, if you're in a small town in New Hampshire going to prep school, walk down to the sandwich shop or pizza shop, do a couple social media posts or some free meals, maybe sign a one-page contract just to grease those skids, just to get used to what it's like to talk to a business owner, sign a contract, fulfill an agreement, and then collect your pay or free pizzas. Like, that's small potatoes to start, but that's the baseline which you're going to build on for bigger deals if you get better and better. And you can be a D3 player these days and have a great social media following and get deals, right? But are we going to have NIL deals in the prep school world? Yeah, for the higher end players and the national schools, I think so.
Interesting. Super insightful, Cory. We'll have to have you back on as this world evolves, I'm sure, over the next year or two. And yeah, this was great. Super, super interesting. And man, what a fun time to be in sports.
Fun time. And I know you've got a lot going on in the business end. This is just a small niche of it, but there's a lot going on in the football prep school world, hockey. No one's even, here's a business thing for all the investors listening to this. If someone wants to start up a post-grad volleyball academy in the West Coast, you've got, and yeah, you're putting your finger up. Is someone already talking about this?
No,
Yeah.
I just know it's a good opportunity because volleyball is massively underserved. And now there's a pro league at the top. So you got to bring that infrastructure downstream.
Yeah. So now high school players go JUCO. Let's start a post-grad academy somewhere in Scottsdale or San Diego, and you'll get dads with money putting their daughters in there for $30K a year. You house them, you train them, you bring in coaches, you play against JUCOs. Voila. There's a free business deal for whoever wants to take it.